That has always been my life. I have spent half of my life in and out of the country's prisons.
As a white, I was always better off than any black prisoner.
I went to jail in 1952 for the first time.
Our deaths are never registered as black people in this country.
Maybe the time they started shooting at us, there's one thing that they did not realize, especially in me. Well, I can say they can manage to kill my flesh, but they won't manage to kill the spirit which I'm having now, the spirit for the liberation.
In South Africa, where Winnie Mandela and her colleagues live, life has always been harsh if you're not white. But now emergency military rule has been added to the poverty, the suffering and the rigid controls that apartheid has always imposed. What's gone wrong? It's an explosive situation where urban warfare has become the norm.
We are now living in a military camp, a concentration camp. Each and every corner you turn, you see army vehicle and a soldier. Even the kids have got used to their faces, their appearance, because it's all just in their everyday lives.
There's violence in the streets, but most of all, there's violence in the schools. Young people are fighting pitched battles with the army and police. It's the young who are bearing the brunt of the new struggle. Tear gassing is used quite indiscriminately to try and stop the protests. This may have been an accident, but the police have arrested very young children, some only 7 and 8 years old.
Soweto kids, because of the horrors of their life, achieve a premature maturity, even at 7 and 8. But you can't tell me that those little kids of 7 and 8 weren't frightened out of their lives when they were taken and held in the police station. They must have been terrified.
Helen Joseph was an active trade unionist. She's been fighting apartheid for 30 years.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes to disperse.
The police will come in 15 minutes. If you haven't gone, they are going to use rifles.
All right, your 2 minutes is up. Charge and arrest them.
All outdoor meetings and marches are illegal. Many who demand an end to apartheid still believe in peaceful protest. They may suffer for that belief.
15 minutes. If you're not gone, they will be here and they will have rifles with live ammunition. My advice to you is to go.
In South Africa, the call for freedom is a call for an end to the pass laws and votes for all. In 1959, these demonstrators in Durban challenged the law, and they were beaten. In 1960 at Sharpeville, a peaceful protest against passes ended when the police opened fire. 69 were dead, and the outside world for the first time joined the call for reform. 16 years later, school children in Soweto protested peacefully, but met with a violent response. Pindi Mavuso lost a leg in that protest.
To tell the honest truth, I knew nothing about politics then. I was still very, very young. What I was doing was only attending a funeral, and what I knew then was the demonstration against Africans. That was all I was demonstrating about, and it was just a peaceful demonstration. And then all hell broke loose, and they started firing at us. Then we were running in all directions. I got shot whilst I was running away from them, and then I fell. But I was next to a bunch of trees, and then I slid under those trees not to be seen by the police, because it was their habit. If they've injured someone and they see that he's still breathing, they'll just kill you in order for you not to lay a charge or do whatever.
For many months, the schools were shut. When they reopened, extra money was found, but white schools still get 10 times as much. During the protests, 460 students died because they objected to segregation. Hundreds more were maimed or injured. John Vorster Square in Johannesburg is used by the police for the detention and interrogation of apartheid's opponents. District Surgeon Dr. Wendy Orr has told the courts of systematic torture in such centres. More than 2,000 people have been detained, and even in jail there's apartheid.
Once every day, the wardresses on duty would change shift, and we'd have just a few moments when we could call over the tops of our cells to each other. And that was when I discovered that I had a bed with a mattress. She had a mat on the floor. I had a sanitary bucket with a lid. She had an open bucket with a cloth over it. I got meat every day. She got it 3 times a week. And these things became so awful to me that made my stay in that jail almost torture.
It was the South African police procedure. If you were injured during the demonstrations, if you arrive at the hospital, you're going to have a sticker here in your forehead stating that you are a terrorist, and then you'll be under police guard. After you're discharged from the hospital, you'll be sent to jail.
The purpose is to shatter your soul, to so demoralize you. They hope that you actually change your views. What they do forget is that you can detain the physical being, but you can never detain one's ideals. And if anything, you simply solidify them.
Helen Joseph is Winnie Mandela's close friend. Winnie's husband, Nelson, the leader of the African National Congress, has been in prison since 1962.
In some ways, I've taken the place of her dead mother, and nothing can break that relationship. Nothing we do can break it. During the times when we were banned, or when she was banned and I was listed, and when we couldn't communicate verbally, we did through brief periods of letters, not long, but those letters brought us very close to each other. And we could sort of write freely, because the letters always went by hand, and we knew that nobody else could see them. And I think the very fact that it was a clandestine correspondence made us much more eager to talk things out to each other. Not many letters, but very precious. In those days she had a lot of difficulty. She wasn't earning a good salary. She was battling with the children, trying to bring them up the right way, trying to make them feel that they were Mandelas and they were Madikiselas too, from her family. And I think trying desperately to compensate for what they had lost, which was the father figure which they had lost, because then they were not able to go and see him. She really put the children before, well, and Nelson, but there wasn't much she could do for Nelson because he was in jail, but she put the children before everything.
When they were sentenced on Robben Island, we were entitled to 1 visit every 6 months and 1 letter every 6 months. It has been a gradual process to reach the quota of 1 visit a month. It has been very, very difficult and very painful.
Last year, Mandela was moved from Robben Island. Winnie Mandela is on her way to Cape Town, where her husband is now in Pollsmoor jail.
From June of last year, we can touch him, we can shake hands with him, we can hug him. One could not even be grateful for that, because it is a human right in any country that is not fascist, that is not as beastly as our country. When you get married in apartheid South Africa, when you marry in a society that is so sick that every aspect of your life is political, you hardly ever really marry the man. There are no romantic dreams about it. When you marry, you know you are marrying because of your people.
Mandela has been arrested and interrogated for days and nights on end. She has been banished, sent away from her home in Soweto, and spent more than a year in solitary confinement. It has been a lonely and difficult life. Winnie was the first black to qualify as a social worker in South Africa, and while banished, she used her skills and training to start a children's clinic in Brandfort.
I knew the road would be uphill. I knew that history would determine my private life.
The new job of executive president makes Mr. Botha the most powerful man in South Africa's history. The question is whether he's using that power for true reform or to prolong apartheid. Some things at least have changed. New mixed-race and Indian MPs. No blacks, though, and the whites still control this place. Here, Mr. Botha uttered the words that put apartheid into reverse.
The government accepts the permanence.
It means absolutely nothing. It's a facade. It's absolutely a fraud, that parliament. The few Indians that are in parliament, so to speak, are there with a 2% vote, really. And they have got absolutely no say at all over the rest of the Indian community. I mean, they can't even have any hope of ever getting one iota of the Group Areas Act removed.
The Group Areas Act, like segregated education, is at the heart of apartheid. If people are kept apart, black and white, Asian and coloured, equal chances for a better life are slim. In South Africa, 5 million whites have all the opportunities. 27 million others have very few. Amina Kachalia's garden is next to an urban motorway because she has defied segregation laws. She too has been imprisoned for her beliefs.
We cannot buy a home where we want to buy a home. We cannot have a business where we want to. And that is the Group Areas, and it has affected hundreds and thousands of Indian families all through South Africa. It has made their lives an absolute misery. If I feel like going to live in Soweto, allow me to go and live there with the blacks. If I feel like going to live in the northern suburbs, and if I can afford a home there, that's what I want. I want to choose and be able to live and be where I want to be. And I haven't ever been able to do that, not in South Africa. I mean, I was born into the apartheid system 50-odd years ago, and I'm still here, living under it.
20 years ago, the signs were clear. Buses and trains were for blacks or whites only. Today, the government has promised change. But even at this relatively trivial level, has anything really altered? Segregation at home, at school and in Parliament will always exist, says South Africa's president. But segregation in the street has gone. Or has it? No sign on the bus any longer. But black buses now have black stops. And white buses white. South Africa is the only country in the world that makes laws based on the colour of your skin. But if you can't vote for change, does it really matter which bus or beach you have to use? It's a mad, bad joke. It's a leisurely and elegant life for the country's whites, with all the privileges that money can buy. But even more importantly, they can vote to maintain their superior position. Blacks hold little statutory power. There's work in Johannesburg if you are black, but only if you have permission to be there. The city's life is based on the gold that's half of all foreign sales. Work and wealth. A lot of it comes from £750 million of exports to Britain, and Britain has £4 billion invested there. Some countries won't trade with apartheid, No South African fruit goes to Sweden, and Austria has banned state investment. But sanctions could make life even poorer, especially for blacks.
There are no clinics. There are no schools. Living in little tin shed, homelands, anything that you could think of which could assist people in their settings as people would live in a healthy kind of a situation. There is nothing of that is provided there. The poverty is extensive. When we say South Africa is suffering from all sorts of poverty diseases in a country so rich as South Africa, there's a silent genocide.
Sister Bernard is a nun at St. Angela's Convent and president of a women's organisation. She works in the homelands as well as here in Krugersdorp. Their township advice centre is based on self-help. Advice workers spend most of their time helping clients to find their way through the pass laws, merely to establish their right to work. The rules for local factories are stringent. Both owner and worker can be fined when a black is sent back to the homelands. People are dumped hundreds of miles from their family and friends. Winnie Mandela.
Thousands and millions are removed forcefully from rich parts of the land that was occupied by their forefathers, and taken to those areas the white man does not want because they are not productive, to those areas that have been bled dry. There are no jobs, there are no factories. These are barren areas which cannot hold the populations that have been forced onto them. The infantile mortality rate is bound to be the highest in the whole world, where people have a constitutional right to send people to their mass graves in the 20th century. We are reduced to the position where we in fact occupy the concentration camps, which are called the homelands, and areas of starvation, of desolation and hunger, where we are sent to die.
77% of all black South Africans want sanctions from outside the country. But at shops like this, they're also exerting local consumer pressure. Black boycotts have been so successful in some areas that white owners have been forced to help implement better living conditions.
I'm not against white people. What I'm against is the system, the laws of this country. I am against the laws of this country.
Maponyas and black-owned shops like it in the townships have increased their trade as a result of the boycott. It's been said that sanctions will harm the chances for work here, that black South Africans will have more to lose from them than white. But blacks still support them and see them as a way of helping to force political change. The Commonwealth has given South Africa a few months to make major political reforms. Then many member countries will stop trading in oil or computers or food or other vital goods if nothing is done.
When we ask the international community to apply sanctions against this country, we are saying, stop financing our oppression. Stop propping up the Pretoria apartheid regime, because Pretoria is financed by the international community. when they sing that sickening song, that sanctions will hurt the people whom they are supposed to assist. We have listened to that song for the past 300 years. We cannot be hurt more than we already have been. And we aren't any better because the various Western governments are financing our apartheid. In fact, we are where we are today. The country is plunged into the violence it is plunged today because of the financing of South Africa by the West, the Reagans and the Thatchers.
Anglo-American is one of the biggest South African mining groups. When there's economic crisis because of political unrest, Anglo-American, with the rest of the business community, calls for reforms. South Africa owes the world's banks $24 billion, but it can't pay its debts. Anglo-American Zach de Beer wants freedom of movement and basic political change.
It would be a unanimous opinion in Anglo-American that the influx control system needs to be revised in very important ways, that there needs to be very much more freedom of movement. Citizenship is not capable of being dealt with in a discriminatory manner. Every South African has got to get the full rights of citizenship, and that means, amongst other things, the right to vote, the right to sell his labor wherever he wants to, the right to be educated in a non-discriminatory way, and the rest.
When Ronald Reagan announced some sanctions, President Botha immediately promised reforms. The world's financial markets are waiting to see whether real democracy comes to South Africa before they offer any more help. The Americans, above all, are withholding their money.
For God's sake, let us realize our ultimate end. We do not want our chains polished. We do not want our chains of oppression changed into gold. The wealth of the country belongs to all who live in it.
It's the young particularly who now demand a share of that wealth and power. Coloured students at the Cape are saying they've had enough.
The school children today feel that they'd rather die fighting or creating their violence as they are doing than living in the manner that they have been living, because they've got so little to live for, they feel. So dying that way is to them just another way of life.
Deaths in the townships come now not only from the police and the army, but also from local anger against those seen as traitors. Pindi Mavuso has her own commitment.
I think I'll do anything which is within my power to do in order to achieve that liberation struggle. Anything, even if it can cost my life.
Bongani Khumalo was 19 when he was shot by the police in Soweto. His mother remembers him as a loving son and a caring boy. Funerals have become the only legal outlet today for political expression.
I would like to appeal to you youngsters, because we have allowed the government to lock up people like Mandela. We have allowed people like Tambo to have to go and fight from outside the country. Leadership is very important. I would like to say to you that you must begin now to build up a true leadership among yourselves. A people without leadership is lost.
The government blames the United Democratic Front and the African National Congress for the growing opposition to apartheid. But jailing the leaders and banning organizations has done nothing to damp down the anger. There are promises of reform to the pass laws and some sort of vote for blacks, but nothing less than full democracy and majority rule will satisfy these young people. 15,000 people came to Bongani's funeral to express their pain and their anger. Their strength and cohesion gives them the certainty that their struggle will eventually be successful. Bongani's death is one of hundreds. His sister Elizabeth and his mother do not believe his death has been in vain. Clearly, dedication, commitment and courage are not in short supply. The country is vulnerable to outside pressure, but it is South Africa's own people who will forge their future.
In the Freedom Charter, we say the country belongs to all who live in it. The people of this land, the majority of this land, will have to determine what government they want. It is their business to sort out that.
Nobody has ever said white people should leave this country. We are ever saying that there is a need for talking together and releasing our rightful leaders.
A future South Africa, which we shall realize at whatever cost, is a South Africa where each one of us, each person, has a right to cast his vote. Each one of us has a right to the wealth of this land.
I'd like to see what every peace-loving mother wants to see in South Africa. Peace, happiness, and a one South Africa without apartheid, without the ugliness that we've been used to ever since I've been born.
To have a just society when no one is going to be judged by his color, race, or creed, and everybody living equally and very, very happy.
Justice cannot come without some form of violence, some violent revolution. I think it has to come. And I bitterly regret it.
The people of this land, on all occasions and in each instance, have reacted and responded to the violence of the government.
Look, I believe in the theory of a just war. I'm not a pacifist. And to me, this is a just war that the people have to fight.
If it brings us to death, let it be. As long as the future of our children and our country and our nation will be bettered by what we are doing, and even by that death.